the route that I'm going is to try to create playgrounds in which people can practice intentional dialogue with each other, to create those containers where you skill up in the capability of having the intentional relationships that you want to have. Welcome back. This is episode 4 of Exploring Resonance. I'm your primary host right now, Edward Wirtz, and I'm here with my friends Thomas Whitmire, Elizabeth Sabet, and Faten Pahlawi. And we're your regular hosts. So today's episode is going to be about what we're interested in terms of community. We'll do our normal format. We'll do our check-in, where every person gets to check in with what's going on in their day, and then we'll have an open dialogue afterwards. So as part of your check-in, go ahead and elaborate as well as what you would like the communities that you're building and the community that you're wanting to build in the future. Anybody would like to go first? All right, I can check in. A few updates. I've got less hair. That's one. What else is going on? Family and I are going on a Bahamas vacation in a couple weeks. That'll be nice. In 2 weeks, I'll be out of town and going to a company conference to present the proposal I've been working on for the last few weeks. So it's nose to the grindstone with doing that work. And then I've been meeting with Thomas out of band with one of our mutual friends, Dan. And we've been looking at our individual projects and just speaking about them, what we're working on next. Dan's doing a startup in assisting nonprofits and business corporations with getting on track with AI. And I think that's a really fun angle. At my workplace, we're also looking at building AI tools. So the theme of AI is pretty heavy in my sphere, and looking at that type of thing. What else is going on in my life? I've been a little stressed, and with stressed, a little overeating. So ebbs and flows on the eating. But other than that, still working on putting things in order. I'm working on a business venture called Clear Maps. And Clear Maps, to me, is designed to be like a community building vehicle for me. I've got 2 articles written, the ETC article, Embodied Transpersonal Culture, and the Community Operating System article, that are the 2 halves of my direction, where I want to explore what does profit sharing look like, new modes of economics and new modes of profit sharing that is enabled through Web3 technology and blockchain. So got this whole arc that I'm going to go down, and I'm in the process of doing the business plan, finding a lawyer, and doing what I need to do in order to make sure I don't stumble along the way, trip over myself. Other than that, things are going really well, and I'm running out of stuff to say. So community that I would love to participate in. One of the other articles I've written is called Network Intentional Communities. And I see myself in 5 years, less being a software developer and more of somebody that's helping communities bootstrap and different life cycles of communities, intentional communities where people are intentionally relating to each other in a deeper way. Also building businesses together and living around each other and being more integrated in society in a deeper way with each other. So my heart and soul is wanting to build the world I wish I was born into. So more open mentorship, people being able to see each other, the ability to be vulnerable with each other and share what's going on inside of us, not be ashamed of it, just being understanding and where people are in their developmental process, and collaborating with each other. I'm a very social creature. I've been an introvert most of my life, but mostly because of my hypersensitivity. I didn't know how to relate to people. And once I figured that out, I think I've become more of an extrovert on the Briggs-Myers, on the topics that when I'm comfortable, I'm an extrovert. If I'm uncomfortable, I'm an introvert. So I refuel actually through social interaction, if it's connected interaction. So that's why I'm deciding I'm not an introvert. I'm deciding I'm an extrovert in reality, because I need the context of receptive community to properly feel connected. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, once ClearMaps backend gets all ironed out, being able to put that out there and making ClearMaps a vehicle of people to connect to each other through. All right. I think that wraps me up. I'll go on mute and I'll let the next person unmute.
I guess I can go. I am house sitting for a friend right now for a beautiful cat named Sugar, who might join us. So just let you know, Sugar likes to be on my lap. So just notifying you of that. Gosh, other than just being super busy with my business and preparations for a trip to Spain that I'll be taking next week, and doing some renovations in the house, life has been really, really, really busy, and externally, but it's been really busy in here as well. And some stress I've had about the house has really opened me up to some stuck beliefs in the subconscious that have been, I think that is the purpose of my whole life, was to come and to dig these things up and release them once and for all. And I think that's what this situation with my house has actually been about. And I've been on this journey since, I think I briefly talked about it when we were talking about home, but I've been on this journey of embodying home since last August. And it's required me to travel around the planet. And in order to release attachments to different types of homes, and the meaning that homes carry. And in this process, I had this intense realization, like something, that we would typically call really negative happened. And I had some human emotion, and I don't cry about stuff, very often, but this one really got me. And I was crying and I said, damn it, I deserve better. And then something inside said, I don't know that you do. Do you remember what you used to do? Do you remember da 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 da? And I was like, oh my gosh. There it is. There it is. Good job, universe. Good job for, making sure that I did not miss that piece, right? And then everything has made sense since then. It's been tiring, very, very, very exhausting, out in the world and then in here. But I'm resting really well. And so, I feel like my soul is in a state of deep peace, even though the pieces are flying around in different directions, and I'm having to, gather them and put them in place. If that makes any sense at all. But I have been, interestingly, I feel deeply grounded, and I feel open, and I feel like my heart's open more than it's ever has been. When I first started building community with Edward in 2007, 18 years ago, I had, was in that love phase of awakening, and, everybody was beautiful and we're all one. And I never locked my door. I mean, I just saw no reason to lock the door. I didn't grow up with locked doors. Of course, that was in the 60s and the 70s. So locked doors never really felt comfortable to me. And so at that point, I left my doors unlocked and it didn't bother me. And everyone was welcome. Just come whenever you'd like, open the door, say hey. And metaphorically speaking, I learned the value of having some locked doors over time. And personally understand that phase of awakening where you're in love with everybody and you only see their beauty and beyond all of their growth, their growth points, And I learned the hard way how dangerous that can be. And now I lock my doors. Now, I don't necessarily want to live with anybody unless they're family, like my children or my grandchildren, siblings, that kind of thing. So even though I want in-person community, I know that what I don't want is a commune necessary. Where I used to think, wouldn't it be great? My greatest joy was thinking about buying a city block, buying like 2 city block where, we all had houses. We tore one of the houses down to build gardens and grow our own food. One of the houses was like a community space and playground for kids, that's what I wanted. And I don't know that there's a difference between a neighborhood and a commune. And I would love a neighborhood where we are neighbors, but not live under, like commune rule, if that makes sense. I love Edward's article on the embodied transpersonal culture. And I think that, that's the kind of community I would love to be in. There's that tier of, deep intimacy. I would love to live in a neighborhood of people who can live in and abide by that level of respect of each other. I would love to have online communities. I'd love to commune with people online. So anyway, it's very interesting. I'm really going through this deep exploration, and I'm certainly not finished. I was a massive extrovert my whole life, and now I'm more of an omnivert. I love people and being around people. And then I have my limit, depending on the people, I have my limit. And I know they have their limits too, right? And then I need solitude. And I've really been enjoying the experience of solitude and my own company and being with myself deeply. And myself with myself has been a lovely new community experience, if you want to call it, communing with the presence of me. So, yeah, that's me inside. I'm getting ready for a trip to Spain. I leave with my daughter and 2 friends next Wednesday in just like 4 or 5 days. And we're going to be walking the short Camino de Santiago. We're going to be walking the Camino Inglés. I think it's 115 kilometers, 81 miles. And we're going to do that in 10 days. We're going to hang out in Madrid for a couple days, walk for 10 days, and then play in Barcelona for a few days. And I'm just so excited and grateful to get to go with my daughter and to share the experience with her. I know I am walking for spiritual reasons, and one of my friends is walking for spiritual reasons. My friend's husband is walking as our guardian and protector. And my daughter is also walking for just the experience of it. And but I know that you can't go to support somebody else and not receive something. So it'll be interesting to see what we all receive from this walk, this pilgrimage. And it's just, I'm kind of in awe of the life I'm living, and I'm super grateful. I have so much gratitude. At the same time, I've had so many tears. The state of the world has been very difficult for me as an empath, as I don't think you have to be an empath for this situation to be hard. The atrocities all over the world. Palestine is always on my mind every day. It is so hard to not be present in spirit with them. And the situation in the US with women going to jail for a miscarriage instead of the hospital being arrested for having a miscarriage, for laws that now punish women up to lifetime in prison for a miscarriage if it can be proved that they did something that did something that caused it or didn't do something to prevent it. Like, what century are we living in? Not what decade, but what century? Puerto Rico has passed a law denying medical care to all LGBTQ plus community members. So it's this crazy experience of coming home to myself, seeking like-minded individuals to deeply, intimately be present with one another and support and love one another, and watch the disintegration of decency in our country and the world. So, that's when it gets really heavy and I've done what I think I can do, then I have to have a cry if I need to have a cry, and continue to pray and send light and find the peace and the stillness within me. And I think that's the only thing that's preventing me from going down a rabbit hole with it. So anyway, hate to be Debbie Downer and end on a Debbie Downer, but when we talk about community, I can't only think about, a community that influences just my life. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Thank you for listening.
So, happy April. We have entered the season that North Carolina calls the pollinating, which is just the great explosion of pollen. So I'm a little sniffy right now, but that's just allergies. Life update, and I'll try to connect this to some community, but tomorrow is my father's memorial, which we're hosting here at the property. We have kind of a small farm, homestead kind of a property, and expecting up to maybe 50 people. So I'm a little overwhelmed right now about the quantity of the event. It's going to be a big house party. I joked that my uncle should bring a keg like back in his college days. But so yeah, a lot of my mind is oriented around that, but it's been funny going through old family photographs. I'm trying to scan. Dad took so many pictures, and he's actually was a community builder at heart, I think, which is why it's been interesting, timely topic for me. And we're going to have people from all phases of his life coming. So between the university, colleagues, and the Christmas tree farm, which was basically a community center for 4 weeks a year, people would come out from all over, all different walks of life, and buy their Christmas trees. So it's pretty cool. There's not much else. It's just been preparing for this, and I feel like it's getting to the end of this arc of his passing, the sort of the acute arc of his passing, finishing with this. So it'll be almost 4 months to the day since he died. And yeah, got the property back in shape too. So that's good. A lot of work. To the topic of community, I'm trying to parse whether to bring it up now for my check-in or just wait until we're having a more ad hoc talk about it. But I'll do a quick personal history. So I mentioned a couple being the Christmas tree farm, and my mom was a high school teacher. So we had those collegial communities, I guess you would say. But personally, I've been through several spiritual groups with, weekly meetings of 6 to 10 people versus 40 people on every quarter kind of a thing. So I'm used to several iterations of spiritual meetings, and I haven't had in person as well for several years, although we've been lucky to have Zoom meetings and these sorts of things to preserve online community. So I do miss that. But I was sort of asking myself, how has my perspective on community shifted over the years? And probably I'll just give the recent story was going back to the hurricane, when for a week we didn't have power and water and cell signal, and we were trapped by water on several sides of this sort of local community. None of our neighbors could get out and that kind of a thing. And we got to know each other during that time. And in this weird way, that was actually what we I think everyone would agree, we kind of missed that, because we have so many different political backgrounds here, but we got to know each other, and we stopped by and check on each other, and all those boundaries that we usually keep. And by the way, people don't move here to the country to necessarily get to know their neighbor necessarily. There's a lot of fences, but all of those that energetic then status quo was just knocked out, And it made me appreciate this old movie I watched from 1945 called Rome, Open City. It's about the sort of that scene right after World War II in Rome, where it was just wide open. And I never understood the meaning of this movie. Why do they call it Open City? What does that mean? And after the hurricane, I realized that's what they're talking about. All those boundaries are gone. Everyone's equalized. And so there's this, it's actually a state of anarchy. My friend Christian was telling me, but it's not anarchy like chaos. Anarchy does not equal chaos, right? So it was all the top-down ways of holding boundaries were gone, and services. So it was all just self-organized. It was all self-organized instantly. And there was a couple days that were just wide open. And I've carried that with me until now. And it was funny because the neighbor 2 houses over that had an F Biden flag, you drive in and he's flying the fuck Biden flag, who, I knew, but that's how, and then I'm of course sort of the opposite end politically. But he was the first person to show up at 7 a.m. with the chainsaw to start chopping up trees around the neighborhood. He invited the people whose house got flooded to live with him for a week, young couple. He was the first person out. And the other neighbors that travel to, love to talk about their travels to Tibet and all these, amazing spiritual places, never saw him, So I was like, that's really interesting. What is community? Who do you count on? What's the community I've been missing? And so absolutely neighborly community has started to take hold here. So there's the community that sort of can organically start to form. over time as you help each other. For my dad's memorial, my neighbor just texted me, let me know if you need anything. We got coolers, we got chairs. I know he voted for Trump. Good guy. We're friendly, but so that's a level of community that I've missed for a very long time. So there's kind of that level, know your neighbors. And then there's the kind of intentional side with like my kindred spirits, getting to have these community meetings and reflect a certain part of me that I value, That's pretty much it. That's my check-in. So yeah, just busy scanning photographs basically for tomorrow. And also happy, I guess today's Good Friday and Easter coming up. Holy weekend for some, but at least springtime. Thanks, everyone.
Well, so good to hear from all of you. I guess this topic today is really dear to my heart. The last week, I have been in translating in an IFS training. So me and another lady are translating what the teachers are teaching and also what the participants are saying. So it's a translation or an interpretation on the spot. So I've really felt that sense of community all last week, being in the group and all sharing the same interest and also beautiful space because the kind of training, it's hands-on. So everyone also opens up, and in the there's a lot of how can I say, in the demonstrations, in the demos, there's a lot being shared. So we get to witness that, and there's people are so open as well. So it's the kind of community really that is dear to my heart to be in these spaces. Spirit is very alive, very, you could feel it in the room. It doesn't matter who believes in what, the type of connection and the type of work, the type of space that is constructed allows for spirit, universal spirit, to be very present. And I guess this is the type of community that I'm looking forward to be part of and to co-build or co-facilitate at the same time. And I just feel continuously drawn more and more towards that. I have to say that I grew up not feeling really a sense of larger community. Being Palestinian and born in diaspora, it's very hard to feel that sense of community. The closest that I could feel belonging to or being in a community, I don't want to say the word belonging because that's a charged one, but being in a community structure was being really more with the family and then more the extended family. Because I think that's the result of that experience of occupation, that the Palestinian people, some stayed inside, but then different places inside were severed from each other. It became like so many, just because of the interruption of the freedom of movement, the freedom of work and stuff like this. This hardship can separate people from each other because they're also separated by their own ordeals where they're struggling from or with. Like Gaza, for example, for many, many years was still isolated from the rest of Palestine. But also looking at my ancestors, the people who were driven out of Palestine, 1948, 67, you name it, they went to different places in the world. And basically, not everyone, like the community got fragmented, let's say. So for people who are connected supposedly through, language, nationality, customs, whatever composes a people or a nation, if you may say, gets, I think, explodes basically and gets fragmented. This is what I can say.
And then I always felt like growing up that, there is a sense of being somehow exiled, even within those smaller structures that remain. I am experiencing a coming back home, however, in the sense like I feel since I've came back to the Middle East, I've been in more, I've spoke about this in the past few episodes or meetings. Since then, I've been feeling a sense of belonging to the land itself. And I do feel more, I want to say community, people communicating, the healing of the disconnect somehow. I feel it in my sessions. I feel it in groups that are meeting and discussing and maybe connecting to each other. I'm starting to understand different things as well. I'm starting to have some insights about it, but also to embody them. So I'm starting to feel like one of the biggest wounds is the wound of disconnect, really, disconnection. And it's very isolating. It is at the root of a lot of, I want to say, dis-ease for many, many people, even maybe not realizing that it is at the root. There's a lot of isolation. And I felt it in my life as well. But I feel like, and I'm experiencing that if that's the wound, then reconnecting would be so healing. And that's what I feel that the community, or I'm experiencing community, is about. First, reconnection, like having the connection, reconnecting. And secondly, and I think you guys spoke of it in many different ways. Secondly is within the bigger community, the bigger structure, when the reconnection has happened, there are the sub-communities that belong in that bigger community. So maybe the community of artists, the community of psychologists, the community of teachers, I don't know. People who are maybe, are connecting based on a common interest or thinking or mindset. What I'm hoping for, what I would like to do is that I think that there is something common between all these sub-communities when they're together, is that what they love, what they identify with, what is of the most value and the most important thing for them. And that's spiritual. I think there is, I think that's where the spiritual is. And then if the spiritual starts to, be experienced based on that in all of these groups, then these groups as well, we all can connect together and make that spiritual connection in the whole group. So that is my ambition. My ambition is to be, to facilitate for such a thing and to co-create such a thing. I feel that I've been flirting with this and I'm, experiencing it in and out in different setups. And I just love it. Life tastes different. But I also want to say that to be there, in order to be there without compromising, Elizabeth, when you spoke about, I want to be in my home, this is my home. And I think it's really, not just think, I've experienced as well that it's really important to feel home within myself and know this is my home, be differentiated. And only then, after then, can I commune. I can't commune when I'm, entangled with somebody. That's not community. At least not for me. We can. I don't think there's hope for a community if we're all enmeshed in each other and we don't have clear boundaries and we don't have our own space as well and our own solitude. So this is this has been my experience. This is what I've been working on for the last, few weeks now. So this topic is really, like coming at a time where I'm really immersed in it. And I'm really looking forward for that to continue to happen. I mean, I love what you're doing with clear maps. And I so understand it, I think. And I would love to be, in that in that constellation of communities and seeing it develop as well. I think I'm going to stop here. So, yeah. Thank you for listening.
Those were some powerful check-ins for me, hearing everybody talk. I really appreciate everybody's contribution. And, clear maps can't get here fast enough in my book. I'm really looking forward to what the world will look like in 4 years. We got to get through the difficulties that are happening right now. But everybody that's responding and trying to build something different and not trying to fight the system, but trying to build around the system, I think is the right way of going about it. And I'm really looking forward to what comes next in terms of bottom-up, self-organizing communities of people that are just oriented to helping each other out. Thomas, when you weighed in on how, the Trump supporter, he was the first one to be out there with his chainsaw and doing what needed to happen, right? It's amazing how a crisis will get people to set aside their differences and just support each other. How do we get to that point where it doesn't matter what you believe? We're relating to the humanity in everybody. It's just weird how I don't think we should be able to do it without needing a crisis to stimulate it. And I just don't know how to do that. The issue is, without a crisis, everybody falls back onto their tribalism of, this is what I believe and this is what's right, and you're wrong for believing this way and stuff like that. And how do we, so without the crisis, that means you're relying on people's innate wisdom and understanding that this is the right way to be. And so I'm really looking forward to intentional communities that have emerged that understand the value of intentionally relating that way.
There's in previous thoughts about community, two things that were just popping to mind as you were saying that was, first of all, I have found in my life, I didn't come out of a family that attended church. I didn't grow up Christian, but I was in that cultural context very deeply where I grew up. It was like all there was. But I find that we're actually missing that functional level, that concentric circle of community. I am anyway, and I feel that a lot of people might be. That's like sort of where those points where you do encounter the wider community, right? Because I could still have my spiritual group meetings or my, videographer meetings. So I do have some small sets, but like, where do you encounter each other outside of those more narrow interest areas? And I'm like, where was it when I grew up? It was church, or it was like the shopping mall, right? So, those levels are, I find, needed. And I think that's what was so deeply healing actually for me about the hurricane, was like, I finally had a place, And so connected to that, as I think about Italy, I've traveled to Italy a lot, in these Latin towns and older cities, they have plazas, piazzas. There's literally built-in architecture to enable community encounters that don't have to be much except waving at someone across the way. You know what I mean? Like, we're just like literally the physical space about it. So I don't know what, just a couple thoughts as you were talking, but I think of sort of those concentric circles of community, and how to enable each of those kind of levels.
Thomas, I really love Spain. And if I didn't have children when I was there in 2006, I would have found a way to move and buy a bar along the Camino and open up, a refugio in Albuquerque for the pilgrims and just have a bar and cook for people because of the lifestyle and because of the town square. Big or small, the town has a town square, at least one, even the smallest village. And that communal lifestyle where they're living in neighborhoods, but there's that opportunity that's built into the culture that says, this is the time to go be amongst your people. And this is the time of day. And these are some spaces, right? And they're very safe, Kids are running around everywhere playing. Nobody's worried about the kids. Everybody's looking after the kids to make sure they're all okay, whether they're yours or not. And yet there's boundaries, right? And there's also meaningful engagement in those. One of the things that there was a place for somebody to have a meaningful impact. And in communities, everybody needs to have, I feel like, a sense of meaningful impact in the community. So whether they provide a service or, there's something for them to do that contributes to the well-being of the community as well. And that creates a healthier ecosystem in the community. And when people lose that sense of meaning and impact in a community, then that's where the problem begins. And we lose wellness. I think whether it's true or not true, there's a lot of people in this country that felt like they no longer had a place or had meaningful impact, that what they do doesn't make a difference. And that starts eating away and eroding at your sense of connectedness, which Faten spoke to as well, and the importance, right? If I don't have a meaningful place and people don't see me as having a meaningful place, then I don't feel connected to the world outside me. So that's just some things that came to my mind as you were speaking. And when we lose humanity for each other because we're different, that you can't help somebody because they're too different, then we're in big trouble. And I think it's very telling, that the more open people were not out helping.
It's so interesting because it's almost impossible for this kind of exploration not to be somehow political by its nature, by the way. I'm not saying, because whenever we're talking about community, the very existence of community is by itself political, political in the sense that it just suggests the connection and all the impact and the meaning and all what you're talking about all at the same time. One of the things that a discussion that I heard lately, I was part of, was discussing this thing about, I'm just going to use the Palestinian as an example, and maybe you can tell me if you have something equivalent to that as well in your experience. Like half of the Palestinian community is in diaspora, is not living inside Palestine. And any kind of discussion, political discussion or any kind of discussion that is happening right now, it talks about, what can change for the people inside Palestine. Any solution is a solution for the Palestinians inside Palestine. And it seems like the people who are outside, like the diaspora, are not included the solutions, are not included in the thinking, they don't have a voice as well. They're excluded totally from this equation at the same time. And that poses a question. Are we still a community? And if we are looking for solutions, do we look for the solutions for the people who are inside Palestine, even if we're not going to be included inside Palestine? And the answer was yes. Because the connection, if the wound is that of disconnection, then the healing and the power is in the connection. And for some people, we're like, well, I don't want to do anything political. And it's such a hard conversation, because once you talk about connecting community and coming to realize what it means to be community, it's not political in the terms of who are you electing or stuff like this, but it's revolutionary by itself to be connected. And I feel that this is what you're talking about. Like Thomas, when you talk about how your neighbor, even if they voted for Trump, does not care about this, still, behaving as a community. This is at the heart of community, like beyond the who is ruling. And if we, as, like humans, can get to this place, which I think we are moving towards that, or there is a big possibility to move towards that. This is one of the things we're doing here. Like, no, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, but if your political affiliation is going to cause or reinforce the disconnect, then that's the real problem. Like, how can we not share, opinions, but still in real life, we are still a community beyond our differences. So, yeah, I would be very interested to hear if you have an experience as well that resonates with that.
Specifically, you're referencing the tension of the sort of inside versus outside, and are we all the same community?
Yeah,
Or?
I'm referencing the connection beyond having like a common circumstances, common experience. There's definitely space for communities that they come together based on a common understanding or common experience or common interest. But then we are still belonging in that case for, almost like a group, like a subgroup that shares certain things. The more challenging thing in my mind is, how do we belong beyond the subgroup to the bigger community?
I don't know if I specifically have an experience like you're talking about, to think about it. What I'm hearing is, that there was a connection through value, like Thomas's example. He was connecting based on a value. And we don't know why other people weren't connecting. We can't make assumptions, that they weren't valuing the other people and weren't engaging for that reason. So we can't make that assumption. We don't know. What we can say is that the person who did get out and help, regardless of, what their political signs were in the yard, he was valuing neighborliness. He was valuing helpfulness. And that's one of the things that we've lost in this country. And again, our city architecture does not invite it. It's not necessary. We've lost it as we've moved from a more rural culture to a city culture. We've lost that sense, right? There's all these, it's complex in the United States. It's been going on since, the shift in the 60s, really started shifting in the 60s. But I feel like we're going through some type of cultural maturation process where we went away from quote unquote traditional values. And I'm not talking about religious values. I'm talking about those traditional values of neighborliness. So I grew up in small town Minnesota and rural Nebraska. And in the rural community that I grew up in, when somebody was sick and couldn't bring in the harvest, everybody brought their combines and helped out and made sure the harvest got in, right? Somebody's having a baby, you go over to her house and you cook and you clean for the family and you do the laundry and you put it up and you make sure the family's fed, right? You don't leave people to struggle through life's challenges alone. You make the effort to go be of assistance, and we have lost. We've become maybe too entertained. We're very interested in our entertainment. When I shared with somebody that I don't have a TV and I haven't had one since 2006, she said, "What do you do at night?" Just
Right.
like that. And I was like, wow. So visit with friends, talk to people, read books, take care of stuff around the house. I don't know, live, right? So we've become so disconnected from the reality of humanity and the needs of humanity and what connection means. So I don't know. I don't know if that I have a solution. I'm just kind of noticing these themes of what it means to have humanity, to notice humanity, to partake in humanity, neighborliness, regardless of differences, I think.
That's so beautiful. Like I'm hearing that maybe the value itself can be, that the common value can be, hopefully one day, is that we share is the importance of connection or interconnectedness. Maybe that's the value, like regardless, kind of. So, no one can live alone, and disconnection will always mean more disconnection.
Yeah, but that's been part of the problem is there's people that, and on both sides of the political spectrum in the United States, they don't want to be neighborly with people that are so opposite of them.
Right.
They find them abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
They find them less than human. They dehumanize each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening on both sides. You're dehumanizing me. I'm dehumanizing you. If you are dehumanizing me, then that means you're less than human. You're scum for saying that about me. And so there's this, right now anyway, there's this really hard back and forth, extremism, and of people not wanting to take the time to see our connection as a race, as a human race. That interconnectedness is not only not possible for them, they resist it, refuse it, reject it.
So I love what you're...
Go ahead.
I love what you're saying, because, and I really do, because I feel like here's what I'm hearing in what you're saying. And maybe it's also what I feel like it's as if the natural state of being human is interconnectedness. And with what is happening, the disconnect is almost like these blocks that have been built that interrupts the interconnectedness or the connection.
Yes, and it's masterfully used against us masterfully used against humanity. If you can get us to give up our humanity and remove ourselves from each other, then we're easily controlled.
And that's why it's political at the end of the day, right?
Edward, what's going through your head?
I'm reflecting, we're talking about neighborly, and I live in the middle of a neighborhood, but I don't interact with any of my neighbors. So I'm just reflecting on what are the circumstances. Part of it is we're like sardines here. I think it's easier to be neighborly when you got a little bit more space in between people as opposed to, and then there's a lot of variance in my neighbors, and we're not interdependent at all. So we tend to, or at least I tend to focus on the interior of my house or my family more than any of the people around me. And most of my life is online. I work remotely. I dialogue with friends remotely. So those searching for connection is somewhat difficult for me in person. Because it takes bandwidth to maintain a relationship. And I'm busy maintaining my relationships online and in my family. So I'm less available. I hardly ever go outside the front door, is what I'm saying. And to the point where I could develop or participate in that sense of local community with my neighbor. There's not a crisis. There's not a need to. Everybody's got inward attention. Where I see it happening in my local neighborhood is with the children that are playing with each other. That causes the parents to interact with each other. So I'm just kind of reflecting what circumstances would need to change in my life in order to facilitate that kind of interaction with my immediate neighbors. And I'm not sure, because when I want to connect, I feel like I'm very meta. If I can't share my philosophical and analytical side as well and my spiritual understanding, then I don't feel like I'm really sharing myself. And almost out of respect of everybody's autonomy and sovereignty, I don't bring up subject matter of spirituality. I don't bring up religion or how do you know what the truth is type of metaphysical inquiry. And so I just stick to the context in which I feel like I can engage and be myself and be more authentic, because I don't know yet how to be authentic with my neighbor. Because I guess I'm just not skilled enough yet. I'm working on it.
I don't know. I got to push back. I don't think that you're not skilled enough. I think, when I was growing up, we were told you don't talk about religion and politics. That's private. You don't tell people who you vote for. And nobody asked, who did you vote for when I was growing up? Those were private matters. If you didn't see each other in church, or you saw your neighbor drive up into another church, you knew what church they went to, but you didn't talk about religion. It was private. It was personal. And I think that's why growing up in the 60s and the 70s in the U.S., there was more interaction with neighbors. And we were still not quite, of course, culture was very different back then, but it was easier to be neighbors with neighbors because you weren't sitting in the kitchen going, oh, they're a bunch of idiots. They're Presbyterians, or whatever. Those Presbyterians, at least not in my experience. So maybe part of the, there wasn't, and of course, there wasn't a cultural norm and understanding of authenticity. I mean, being authentic is new in our culture. Okay. Being authentic means I get to say whatever outrageous thing I want to say to everybody, whether they want to hear it or not. And if I can't, then, So I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that we have new sensitivities now, and these new sensitivities are bringing up new problems. And I'm wondering if you bring that up, and it's like the 4 houses, my 3 neighbors around me. We now know each other's names. We know the kids. My neighbor's out watering his front yard. I'm watering my front yard. We talk about, the dog, and we talk about this and we talk about that. We don't talk about religion and politics. When there's a holiday, we treat each other. We do different things. We don't spend a lot of time with each other. But if we saw there was a crisis, when there was a crisis at my house, my neighbor called me and said, "Hey, there's something going on," And so we're slowly kind of, it's just these 4 houses right now, but it's kind of slowly coming back. And I find that very lovely. So maybe if we just focused on, like, what is this, what are the conditions that you would have to create to know your neighbors, and what would the conditions be for them? Yes, you have to be in your front yard. We don't have houses with front porches on them anymore, right? We used to have front porches, and people used to walk in the evening and not sit in front of the TV for 4 to 5 hours. So, those are the conditions that used to be. You take a walk around the neighborhood, your evening constitutional after dinner, and the family would go for a walk and say hi to other families. And I think there has to be a concerted effort if there is a desire to be more neighborly and to cultivate neighborliness, then we have to create those conditions. Maybe that means a block party, every quarter, and celebrate something that quarter. What are we going to celebrate as a block? I don't know, but I think it's doable. And I think the focus is coming back to humanity, just practicing having humanity and inviting that experience in your life. So I don't think you're not skilled. I think it's just the culture and the conditions, just having known you for so long.
And maybe the other thing is, like, what motivates this? What would motivate it? For example, I'm hearing, like authenticity, and there are places where this type of authenticity, which is the authenticity of speaking my mind on certain, but this is only one type of authenticity. Like, I look at my system and I say, in my system, there is the parts of me or even self in me that wants to participate in certain things, and it has certain qualities, and it has a certain, like, character. But then there is the me that eats, there's the me that, bathes as well, and the me that, I don't know, maybe swims and cleans the house and does, like, laugh at certain things, and connect outside. And I can't say within myself that these parts of me are not authentic as well. They're also authentic. So maybe again, and the question becomes, what motivates connection on that kind of things rather than on the political and the religious? And unless we are really enjoying that one way or another, and it's knowing that it's also fulfilling some sort of a human need, we're not going to be motivated to do it. But what happens in its absence? Life might become so difficult when it's heavy. That's what I'm trying to say is, like, maybe also the other types of less serious authenticity. For that's not a judgment. You correct me. I mean, what I'm trying to say, many different types of authenticity, and that's what happens in community. Like, and all people have different imprints. Like, you get the serious guy, and you get the loud woman, and then you get the extrovert and introvert, and all these. It's like the value of getting to be able to connect to different kinds of people. And I'm challenging myself here as well. Because to be, isolated or for a long period of time, or to get used and acclimatized to being alone and independent and all of this can create habits that are hard to change or transform. Yeah. There was a time when I was like, I don't want to meet for coffee and just have coffee talk. This is a waste of my time. Right? And as I'm growing older, I was like, well, maybe there's some time for coffee and just like talk, please. It doesn't have to be done like every day, but between now and then,
I think that's a lot of what people are missing, actually. At least for myself, a greater percentage of my feeling of disconnection was addressed by simple neighborly meeting, or being able to know the person working at the coffee shop or the supermarket. Oh, hey, getting some of that recovered, at least for now. It's been like, oh, it's not just that I need another spiritual group right now, which would be good too. But, a larger percentage was actually just wanting to kind of like further out their concentric circles of simple connection, that felt really good.
Also assuming that the spirit doesn't have fun. Like maybe spiritual does include as well. And actually joy is one of the unconditional joy is one of the, qualities of spirit. Unconditional. Doesn't have to relate to anything, like joy as well. So I wonder about this. Maybe there's a balance. It strikes me that as practitioners, when we're working with our clients, whatever our client brings to the table, however is our client. So if our client entertains certain ideas, even different than our own values or anything like this, we can meet them. We meet them there. And then not only that, for me personally, it's not just meeting them. It's also the joy of getting to know someone that deeply, that kind of kind of thinking or kind of belief or something like this. How enriching that is. Wow. It's like living a fuller life. It's such a blessing to be able to see so many people from so different walks of life. And I know this might take us a little bit away from the intentional community that we're talking about. What I'm trying to say is that intentional communities can also, or need maybe, to exist in a state of connection to the bigger community as well.
Circulation, absolutely. Keep that going.
I want to say that even with the children, we raise children, and then not all the children are going to grow up and share with us our own values or, our own likes and dislikes. You get the child who wants to do something entirely different. That's like, bless their heart, but it's so different from you. Yeah.
There is something I'm going to throw maybe something of a curveball in. We had some talk about boundaries, and so let me paint a picture is like, of the 60s, you also think of really more homogenous neighborhoods with coming out of a similar cultural background and sharing values. And, I know where Edward lives now, it's extremely diverse, age-wise, as well as ethnicity and background. And so it's less obvious, maybe certain value assumptions that you didn't even have to be conscious of originally. So the curveball would be, maybe it's gotten increasingly important to be able to consciously share and navigate boundary differences or value differences. And that skill, I feel like, is almost important to restoring community, perhaps. So I wanted to throw out that notion of the relationship of boundaries to community. And my second one, maybe we'll come back to that, is also in myself, I've been letting go of, I think I have, letting go of judgment, right? So like, how important is that for tolerance and openness and embracing actually? So the relationship of judgment to connection, or the lack of perceived connection feeling.
Yeah, I think that the judgment is kind of what I was referring to earlier when people want to judge, they want to separate and judge, right? And to become aware that judging is causing suffering, and that I could have something better if I stopped judging. I could have a more peaceful existence, a more full experience of life if I stop judging. Takes courage. It takes a lot of things, So my question is, how do we cultivate that in a community when we see it? By not judging the person who's judging, right? But by meeting them, getting to know the meaning of their judgment for them and what they have when they judge, and what they're hoping that they will have as they continue to judge. And then ask them how that's going. How's that working? What might be different? You have to have permission to have these types of conversations at depth with people. But I think it's an very important conversation that you bring up. The topic that you bring up is the role of judgment in creating community and dissolving community connection. Yeah.
And I would add even navigating, my friend Christian says, you don't really get true community until you've navigated your first difficult conflict. Basically, like, it's all kind of easy, happy when you're up here. But then when you finally have that clash, like, getting through that actually is like the formative, so the ability, the skill set to be able to work through that, and the intention, I guess. Because, that's when you hit that, it's easy to just retreat and go behind your fence again.
Yeah. Remember that group development model, right? Forming, storming, norming, the first three stages. You form, then you storm, and then you normalize, you normal. Then you find a normal. You have to normalize after the storm. And after each storm, after the normalization of each storm, you start forming again anew. And then you have another storm. You navigate that storm together. That becomes your normal, and so on and so on. It's an important part of group development, storming.
I think also there are the people who are skilled, that are just the grease in the wheels that make community happen. They go out, they talk to people. They also have the talent of being able to navigate the storms, being able to navigate the conflicts. And it's become more and more important for people to cultivate that skill set as we become more fractured. We need more intentional people to defracture society, to go out of their way to make the bridges and bring people together and facilitate conversations that get people to reconnect to each other. So I think there is a tremendous need for more and more intentional facilitation of community.
I love the lens of IFS, even when we are talking about collective, like sub-collectives. Communities are collectives. So if we talk about judgment, like the judgment might be a protective, it has a protective function, or a protective, or maybe it has a function to it. Like it's being practiced maybe because as a response to something, and could be avoiding certain fear of something. When I look at judgment, I feel like if we are lacking discernment, or if we are lacking a sense of, differentiation of self and okay with being with our values and others being with their values at the same time, then judgment kicks in, because judgment is a like a more solid kind of wall or more judgment, that cannot maybe be broken. And maybe there is this misunderstanding about discernment and boundaries. Like the more the boundaries are clear and healthy, the less we will need to be in that place of judgment. And then maybe we can transition to discernment and think of the conflict as a space that allows for exposure for diversity. Because we don't have diversity, really, mentality here. But what we have is more like, we're like each other. So, and that does limit the diversity and the exposure to diversity and working with diversity. But I feel, I agree with you, Edward. Yes, we need more, intentional people who are, and intentional, maybe communities actually, who works on building communities, like intentional communities that can work on building communities or facilitating the building of communities, and then facilitating these communities to kind of connect to each other.
Tying to that, I'll share a quick story that did happen during the hurricane when it was wide open, right? What I discovered is that everyone of the neighborhood had a different reaction to appropriate boundaries, because the traditional boundaries were gone. And me, just my default was like, bang, I'm wide open. We had people driving up here. We were walking through the forest to get over to a different house. Just all the normal energetic boundaries were gone. But some people, their instinct was to be protective, right? Like, okay, don't come onto my property. I'm more nervous. I'm more kind of yellow alert. Whereas others were like, yeah, come onto my property. I'm wide open. Like, we got to all help each other now. And so I didn't realize this at first. And there was a conflict I had with a brief one, a friendly one, but we worked through it. But being able to talk about that, I was like, oh, my response has been to be really wide open. Sorry, I walked through your backyard, something like that. And he's like, yeah, I'm just really not comfortable with that. And we came to understand that we both had different, responsive values as well as boundaries, which we may not even have been conscious of because we've never been in that situation before. So the ability, as Edward's saying, for someone to be able to consciously help negotiate some of those, I think is absolutely a critical skill set for future community, or, hopefully coming soon. Because we do now have this diversity of backgrounds and interests. So we do need to be able to more explicitly communicate those with each other,
Have you guys watched the movie Bird Box?
I've not.
Okay. It was a very interesting movie. Yeah, I find that I'm not going to spoil it for you, maybe you want to watch it, but the gist of the movie is something about this: when there is a threat, and it's so interesting in the movie because the threat is actually unknown. The movie never gives away the character or personifies this threat. It's just a threat. And the different responses of people to the threat, but how they move towards it. And then eventually there is this realization that's only that in the coming of a community that, regardless, that we can offset this threat. It's so beautiful. Yeah, I felt that it really speaks to this as well. The tricky part for me is as you said earlier, Edward, does it have to be a threat? Like, why does it always have to be a threat? Because as long as this is what's the need is for connection and for community. And if it's not happening in any other way, it will happen in response to a threat. So maybe this is maybe the question that can be posed to the people who are listening with us is, we don't know which one comes first. Like, collectively, if what we are looking for is connection, interconnectedness, and we don't do that, then maybe humanity will somehow keep reproducing threats in order for that to be forced to happen. But with the awareness that if this is what we're really looking for, and there are other ways of doing it other than responding to a threat, then maybe we can become more aligned with the better way for that to reproduce through awareness, maybe rather than that in response to a threat, which is really connecting on a trauma, like on a wound.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Sorry.
No, that was the question.
I was reminded of those gophers. Like, what are they? The little creatures that always pop out of their hole looking around for the closest threat. I'm like, maybe that's pretty hardwired into humans. Like, we're constantly seeking that, and want to apply ourselves toward that. It does give purpose, I suppose, but
what are they called?
At what point are we generating the threat in order to fulfill that desire, response
subconsciously
need?
I think that subconsciously we could be regenerating the threat. I know this is like a long shot, but I'm wondering, if it's acceptable.
Well, you never know. Yeah. What was the one? It was like getting into these really deep level impulses. Another one, this may be off topic, so we can bring it back, but my friend was just mentioning the need to optimize. And so now that we have the internet, it's like we can always optimize. We feel like we can perfectly optimize our reaction if only we get enough information. And so like we're all like compelled by this now in a way. That's probably too off topic, but we do have these energies that maybe can be retired as you do, or at least seen and transformed to be more healthy and productive,
Yeah.
I know one of my teachers, a lot of spiritual teachers I knew, would get their group to do work projects, just like hard physical labor as a group, in order to sort of exercise and build something together. So as opposed to a threat response, it's more of a constructive direction as well.
I think in the past, people used to help each other in building their homes. In all cultures, the home is not an individual project, not even for one family, but almost like the community builds homes. So maybe that's difficult now with the new economic structures, but it's just as important, I think, online. It doesn't have to be like only in person. In person is important, but also online. When I was reading in this book, and it was about creating healing circles, and using the IFS model, and really something stopped me. I'd like to read some of it if you're open to that. So the writer says that he talks about the famed psychologist Alfred Adler, that he held the belief that social connectedness is innate for all human beings. Of course, we know that. And then that humans, he believed, still need to live and belong in society. He believed that true interpersonal security is deeply connected to a sense of belonging, or as he would state, feeling of community. So according to Adler, since true happiness is inseparable from the feeling of giving, it's clear that a social person is much closer to happiness than the isolated person striving for superiority. The desire to belong, to have purpose, and to manifest one's gifts, that's what you spoke of earlier, Elizabeth, into the world is an innate human longing. While this may or may not exist in one's family of origin, this longing goes beyond family. This is what really, stopped me. Even belonging to specific groups may not quench this longing. Often people imagine community as belonging to some form of organization or structured group. Says organizations or structured groups inherently carry limitations. Issues of inclusion and exclusion, conformity and potential loss or minimalization of the individual's authenticity, what you were talking about. Simply stated, organizations may require essential compromises of the individual in order to belong. Secure feeling of community, as described by Dr. Adler, is more of an internalized experience that is once embodied, allows the individual to expand their sense of belonging beyond structured organizations. The writer of this book, his name is Chris. I don't know how to pronounce the rest of his name. Boris, I think. And I was really interested in that. And it's like, wow, it's really expansive, that way of looking. Wow, bringing that in.
That's really interesting. I'd mentioned last time doing some work about codependency, and I never thought about community codependency, right? Like the compulsive need to derive my self-value from whatever, validation I get from the community. And doing this work on myself, it really makes me consider what it would even feel like to feel integrated and just like comfortable and knowledgeable within myself, within community. It's like a different, I don't know. It's just, that's sort of leading edge. It's just hitting me right now. I want to think about that some.
Because it completes the relational model. Like when we talk about different models, we are usually working in the relational model within. But that work is incomplete if it does not continue to be the relational model that is outside just the person.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the reading because you can put that as like an ideal to become completely independent of need of community. And yet, I don't know if I'm ever going to reach that as an ideal. I still crave quality connection and want to find that in an organized way almost, which is why I'm trying to build this Clear Maps organization that's just structured to facilitate community for people that are oriented that way. There's a lot of idealism around just becoming hyper independent, hyper individual. And I don't know, what is it in any interaction with another person? They hit me in places and I hit them in places. And it's either comfortable, it's uncomfortable, or, how am I relating to the experience of the other person and how are they relating to the experience of me? I don't know. I'm not sure. The writing was very well stated, very well structured. And there is in this individuation process of, even going from child to an adult, you become individual and individuated, and you have your own sense of autonomy. You have your own independent self-esteem, but we don't go off and then be alone by ourselves anymore. We still interact with people, and we still want a medium or a vehicle of getting that mutual respect, mutual value of interaction. So I'm very curious about kind of the description of the end state that the writing pointed at.
Well, I think that the end state that the writing was pointing at is actually what you're saying. It's confirming what you're saying. It's in alignment with what you're saying. So this state, it's not proposing that independency is the way to go. In fact, it's saying that even when we are differentiating through the different stages of our life, we are differentiating in a relational container. We're always somehow in some sort of a relational container or another. That's what I understood. But the container is like what you spoke about earlier, Thomas, in terms of the concentric circles, right? Because the container itself is in a larger container, and it's a larger container, and it's a larger container. And to be in just one container and not be able to feel that relation or to experience that relation to the other, to the other spheres or other containers or anything like this, is a reason for war. Eventually. And a lot of destruction that we are struggling with. Because you get a group of people and they're saying, well, we are better, others are not, eventually. It becomes an exclusive club. So it's at the heart of those creating conflict that is so polarized. And that's what I got from what I heard, yeah.
Yeah, I'm projecting myself into the writing, so I'm not sure if I fully understand the writing myself.
It was literally affirming what you're saying. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I do think there is the realization that I am myself outside of all containers, where a lot of the conflict and war comes from the perception of I'm in a container with somebody else and I feel constrained that I don't have that ultimate freedom because we're trapped inside of a container together. But there is fundamentally a realization to be had that you're outside of all containers. And at the same time, we interact with each other through a container.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so being able to find the right level of dialogue in that container with which we do interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. So outside the need to do that because we have, like a trauma or something like this, how do you see this being achieved, Edward?
I don't have, the route that I'm going is to try to create playgrounds in which people can practice intentional dialogue with each other, to create those containers where you skill up in the capability of having the intentional relationships that you want to have. As for the world at large, I don't know, people would opt into those containers and realizing that that's the problem and here's a solution for skilling up. But as for the world at large, I have no idea.
So I'm hearing the word intentional. It feels like it's a pivotal word here, right? The intentional.
Yeah, for me it is. You realize a certain thing is going on, and you realize the nature of that thing and how to relate to it, and that's when it becomes intentional.
This seems really important. We've all talked about inherited communities that we came into as well. And a lot of people I talk to are working with that feeling of disconnection, trying to kind of identify where to address it, be that, I'm at home too much or I don't know my neighbors. So I like, Faten, what you were mentioning with Edward. This is where the individual person, how do you work with your situation and identifying how to maybe be able to enact or take some steps toward establishing one of those concentric circles of connection to re-engaging that. I don't think I'm aiming at anything talking right now, just sort of thinking through the process. Because I remember out of COVID, it was a weird thing to even do anything, to go to a restaurant. It's almost like I'd forgotten, or the inertia. And so it's almost like there's this level of community that is not easily, naturally available like it feels like it used to be. And I mean, this could just be talking about my own tendencies, right? So it's like, okay, here's this level that is lacking, that I feel like is the zone that is wanting to regrow, right? Or to reemerge. So like starting to think about putting some neurons toward that, of like, what would it mean for me to take some steps on that? Like, something small. Yeah, I don't know. I feel there's this missing, there's this weak, one of those concentric circles, which I think is community, at least for me in the emergent sense, that it's like, okay, I need to start addressing that level, and then asking myself the question, well, what is it? What could that start to look like? I think having this conversation is a great start.
Yeah, I was going to say, having this conversation and maybe volunteer work.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this thing on once about certain libraries where someone would just go sit there and say, I'm ready to listen to whoever wants to talk. They can just come. There's a name for this. I just forget. And I think this was done in Japan, maybe, or in somewhere, I'm not sure, where people can just go and say, on these specific days, you have a number of people who are just going to be there sitting, and they're just going to be listening to other people. So anyone can come in. This substitutes the idea of confession, I guess. So you're not confessing your sins or anything like this, but you are just opening up. And these people who sit there and listen, of course, they have to be trustworthy, that they're not going to take this and circulate it or anything like this, but they just listen. And it started with monks doing that, Buddhist monks. They would just go sit there, and they would just sit there, and they would just give a lot of attention and witness the person as they go through their process, not saying a word, So that was one way for the person to feel that they are not disconnected and alone. What could be their gazillion ways if we are really intending to connect for creative ways of being with each other in so many different ways.
Elizabeth, you've been silent for quite a while, so what's going on with you?
I'm listening, and I really, I'm just listening and agreeing and listening. And I was thinking about, your skill, and I kind of dismissed you. Sorry about that when you said you think you needed more skill. And then there was this, do we have to have crisis or trauma? Can we not do this without? And I was just listening to this conversation. I'm just listening. Actually, I am simply listening. And the experience that I'm having as I'm listening is taking me deeply into my experience of experiencing you guys in community and being in community with you and observing community with you. And that's really all that's been going on here. I love what Faten said. It doesn't have to be serious. It can be fun. It can be joyful, right? Then we came here to do this podcast because we want to resonate with one another. We do because we do resonate with one another. And we wanted to offer what exploring resonance could look like, right? People may think we have a lot in common, and we do have some things in common, but we have a lot of differences too, right? And yet there's a willingness to be open and explore together. Then I was just hoping that whoever's watching this is inspired some way in exploring resonance with their neighbors or with people they wouldn't normally speak to or engage with, to see if they can find something they can resonate within that other person. So that was just going through my head.
Beautiful. Thank you. It's a great equal point. Yeah, you go another hour or so, but we need to bring the meeting to a close.
Edward, would you, we can, if you want to keep this or not, but I know this was actually had some potential we discussed of spinning out or spinning off into a sort of a community kernel. Could you remind me what that prospect was, or what the kind of idea was of the relationship of podcasting or with Clear Maps, to talk about it for just a minute?
Yeah. So the big general idea is a lot of different podcasts would be a way of bringing people in, different subject areas, different topics. I think with the exploring resonance, I really like the idea of, we're a tight-knit group. We've all interacted with each other for quite a while. What does that look like when people have an active dialogue with each other? So this is an example of where people could get to level of depth of conversation, the amount of rapport. What does it look like when people have rapport with each other, and just open trust and communication? We haven't caught it on camera, which is how we support each other in vulnerable states. And so in terms of what would happen inside of more, the types of communities I imagine that hopefully this would inspire, is that level of vulnerability being captured. It's very difficult to do that in a public way, which is what this recording is a public recording. But so wanting the Exploring Resonant podcast to be kind of a call to action for people to intentionally dialogue with each other, form tighter knit communities, and take the time to be in dialogue with each other. Yeah, how do we demonstrate the value of being in dialogue? Because I know when we walk away from an interaction like this, we frequently report being refreshed, feeling inspired, feeling more grounded, and just rejuvenated in general. And I wish there was a way to tune people into that experience. But there's, people also have a lot of internal resistance to participating in a fully vulnerable dialogue as well. So, I don't know. Those are my thoughts that are coming up in response to your question.
Thank you. That's great.
We'd have to be willing to let the cameras roll when we show up, and in a vulnerable state, going through our messy, falling apart puddle of goo, and be the brave one to let the camera roll.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful idea.
So, we might take that into consideration.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not a call to the universe to bring chaos into my life.
No.
Pointing that out.
No.
Be clear.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for trying that. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, we already have things. We don't need new things. So we can read from what we have. We don't have to have a new episode of anything.
Yeah. And folks, I apologize. I do have to go.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you, sweetheart.
You want to do an ending,
Thank
Edward,
you all.
so that you can kind cut and paste?
Yeah. So I think this conversation is pivotal because then it can launch us into a variety of other conversations about being connected and commuting, and even like how do we grow? Maybe what's the next iteration of the interaction in the Exploring Resonance podcast? Do we explore one-on-one dialogues with each other, which capture those deeper interactions, building relationships with each other? Do we have guest speakers come in? Do we grow the number of people that are actively participating and regularly participating on the podcast? So there's a whole lot of places that we could go from here. And I think this conversation that we had with community is a great launching point. So we'll discuss that on the back end and see where things go from here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Edward.
Right,
Thank
everyone.
you, Thomas. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Bye.
Have a wonderful
Love you all.
trip to Spain
Bye.
as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.